we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And why are you wearing orange today?
I was just about to tell them because
I have a little orange myself.
You do, and in fact a better orange, I think, than I do. But the Eastside Catholic School students in Seattle, who we've been raving about for several weeks, are holding a big Everybody Wear Orange Day this week in support of the gay vice principal who got fired and all LGBT teachers who are getting ousted by their religious schools.
I was reading in the Times that some of the students support getting rid of that gay teacher.
Really?
But they're afraid to speak out. Good. That's the idea. You know, that let you be the ones who are ashamed for a change instead of us.
And, well, yes, and let us just explain that we're not against anybody speaking, but
of course,
we don't think everybody should be honoring bigoted speech.
Right.
So that's why we would say
but
something like
lots
that.
to talk about in the news. You may have read that Virginia's new Attorney General, a Democrat, announced that he will not defend the state's unconstitutional ban on same-sex marriage.
Elections do matter. And the story that fascinates me the most this week, perhaps, is the vote in the Indiana House on moving a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage to the ballot this November. It's going back and forth between the House and Senate. It's very close.
It ain't over till it's over.
Has many possible outcomes.
In the Ivory Coast, an LGBT rights group had its offices ransacked by a mob. A Nigerian court that was trying men for homosexuality is attacked by an anti-gay mob. Well, you hear this story.
Yeah.
And in a story that we started to talk about last week, in Kenya, a beloved author has come out.
Sad news from India. Our hopes are dashed. The Supreme Court is refusing to review its decision reinstating the laws criminalizing gay sex or sodomy in general. I don't know if it's ever used to prosecute straight people, but it is a sodomy law.
Right.
The Parliament's the only one that can make the change now.
Well, I think it's a buggery law, you know,
Yeah,
I think that is a gay thing.
And that's one of the reasons that, well, we'll discuss it in a moment.
Right. The mayor
Stay
of
tuned.
Sochi, Russia, says there are no gay people in his town.
Get your pens and paper handy. We're going to give you details about a big anti-Russia demonstration next week on the opening day of the Olympics here in New York. You are going to want to come to this and know all the details, so be prepared.
All right, Robert De Niro has done a new documentary about his gay daddy.
And Andy will review a new Irish play on Broadway with Deborah Messing, a Brecht play with Justin Vivian Bond and Stephen Spinella, and a new play on two of the founders of the NAACP.
And, of course, we're going to review that wedding at the Grammys, presided over by Queen Latifah.
Very controversial on many, many counts.
Okay.
And I should apologize up front if I look strange this week. I'm coming down with a cold. I should have a privacy screen here. And I forgot my notes, so it's out of my head and Andy's notes.
But
You won't see me checking things
Ann
off.
didn't need notes. First time I was ever on television with Ann, you were hosting something for Hedrick Martin Institute on television, didn't use any notes, spoke completely clearly. I was in awe of what you could do and can do.
It's all because my parents made me talk at the dinner table on Sundays and do little performances of the Mikado when I was about 8.
There was no talking at our table.
Really?
It was just eating. People didn't come up for air. There were like 11 of us around the table, literally, and everybody just chimed. There wasn't much conversation going on.
Well, there were only 5 kids. Who were the other?
Grandma was always live with us.
Okay.
And then my sisters, when they got married, they would often have their husbands there living with us, and sometimes their kids. So there was one time when there were 11 every night. I had dinner parties for 4 people, and I'm exhausted. I don't know how my mother did it.
We
helped her.
If we weren't articulate and well-read at 8, we weren't eating.
All right. Well, let's start off in Virginia.
Okay.
because you said elections have consequences.
They do.
Mark Herring won this vote by a couple of hundred votes.
To be the new Attorney General of Virginia. The Democrats took over the administration of Virginia statewide from the hideous Republicans. Governor McConnell, now under indictment. Attorney General Cuccinelli wanted us all to go back to the Stone Age. So McAuliffe won the governorship, and Herring was in a huge battle for the Attorney General position weeks after the election. Right. Finally won it by a few votes, and now
we didn't know what he was going to do about the lawsuits. There are two big lawsuits there on same-sex marriage. We didn't know what he was going to do.
Well, in fact, in 2006, he had voted for the ban on same-sex marriage as a member of the legislature.
Why won't you let him speak for himself? We do have a videotape of him explaining what he's going to do in these suits.
Roll tape.
Having determined after thorough, rigorous legal analysis that an unconstitutional law is infringing on the rights of Virginia families, I have a duty and the authority to act to protect them and their rights. Until the courts can rule on the matter, the State Registrar, Janet Rainey, will continue to enforce the current ban, but neither she nor I will defend its constitutionality. Even as courageous Virginians have advanced the cause of equality, the Commonwealth of Virginia has too often argued on the wrong side of our nation's landmark Supreme Court cases. With Prince Edward County as defendant in the landmark school desegregation case of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, with the Commonwealth fighting the right for Mildred and Richard Loving to marry, despite their race, in 1967 in the Loving decision. And in 1996, to oppose opening VMI to female cadets. The same legal principles that applied in those cases apply in this case today. As a legislator in 2006, I voted against the right of same-sex couples to marry. Even at that time, I spoke about the need to fight other forms of discrimination against Virginians based on their sexual orientation. But I was wrong to stop short of marriage equality. It's time for the Commonwealth to be on the right side of history and the right side of the law. So a state law and a state constitution cannot violate the United States Constitution, and I swore a duty to uphold both, and the Supreme Court is clear. The United States Constitution is the law of the land, supreme law of the land.
I love it when people
I have just come to the conclusion that I wouldn't want the state telling my son or my daughter who they can and cannot marry.
As I interrupted him, I love it when people change, and it's very moving.
I love it when people look at the law and follow it. Yes. You know, it is, all of this is so common sense to me. It's why when they passed all these laws against same-sex marriage.
15 years ago you said this.
I said, you know, these are all unconstitutional. Read the United States Constitution. These are all going down, and one by one they are.
But there is still one state, Indiana, which is still thinking about passing a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage when most states have exhausted this possibility.
Spitting into the wind.
Yes. So talk about it.
All right. So I believe they already have a law in the state against same-sex marriage. Yes, and they just are trying to up it with a state constitutional amendment.
And they couldn't do it because Democrats were in control of one of the houses and they wouldn't let it come up.
All right. So now what they did was they wrote a proposed state constitutional amendment that would forbid same-sex marriages, forbid civil unions, forbid any recognition of any domestic partner relationship that resembled marriage.
And they passed it overwhelmingly.
A year or two ago.
Yes, but then then the way it works in Indiana, that's slow.
And other states.
If you want to change the Constitution, it takes a while.
You have to pass it twice in the legislature.
You have to elect a new legislature before you pass it again.
Yeah, and then it goes to the voters for a vote.
So that was what happened in January. They were ready, and all of a sudden, they weren't ready. They moved it out of a committee where they thought it was going to lose. They put it into the Education Committee, and then some of the Republicans said, I don't want to vote for this unless you get rid of the civil union thing, because I don't want to ban that too.
Right. So
in the House.
So the committee in the House, the second committee, did pass it as was, but then it went to the whole House, and they had this argument, which shocked me, by the way, that any Republicans would stand up against any part of this. But the House voted to delete the civil unions part of it. Now,
52 to 43.
But what that did was it triggered this whole strange thing, because the rule is you have to pass it in consecutive legislatures that are separately elected and then take it to the voters. But if it changes in the meantime, you've started the clock all over again. So
they wouldn't then be able, if it stays this way and they can't get the Senate's going to probably keep it the way it was.
Yep.
And if the House won't agree to that, then it's dead. Well,
it may be dead, but here's what happens.
It could be dead if
they can't reach any kind of compromise and vote on something. But here's what happens. The House has voted on the changed version, which deletes civil unions and domestic partnerships. So the House said, we're only going to vote for it now if it bans same-sex marriage alone. That passed in the House. Now it goes to the Senate. But the Senate can either pass that version, which starts the clock again, and then they'd have to pass it in another legislature in a year or two, and then it would get to the voters in 2016. Or the Senate can say, no, we're going to keep it the way it was originally. We're going to insist on that and keep the clock as going to the voters this year.
Right. What would the National Organization for Marriage like to happen? Obviously, they wanted to go this year, but...
They would like us all to fall into the ocean. That's what they would like to happen.
As long as their 7 donors don't fall into the ocean.
Yeah, and
that's all they have.
So if the Senate passes the original version, they then go to a conference with the House and try to work it out. And if the House conferees could say, okay, we'll go back to the original version that bans civil unions and domestic partnerships. And if the whole House then agrees to that, in spite of having taken it out before, then we're still on the 2014 track.
Right.
But if everybody agrees to the amended version, then we go to a 2016 track.
The polling is decent in Indiana that it might not pass, although it's not great, so it might pass. We just don't know.
We don't.
But it's silly because, it's going to eventually be overturned.
To me, this is a moral victory at this point, no matter what, because we did not expect to hold it up even this much or change it.
Well, they worked very hard out there in India. We've reported on it every week. Every week they lined up a new group to speak out against this. Business groups, faith leaders. Every week the Indiana Equality rolled out a new group. That's the model for folks around the country.
And that's what I love about this story.
Busy.
Yes, that it is this grassroots, day by day, person by person action that gives you the chance of actually having victories. Freedom Indiana is the group that has accomplished this far.
Freedom Indiana, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so. So if you want to check out more about the details of this, go to their website, Freedom Indiana, and you can get the whole story. And it's very inspiring, and that's why I love this story.
Now, in Nevada, it's a different story from the Attorney General there, Catherine Cortez Masto.
It has its inspiring moments, too.
Well, she's urging the Ninth Circuit to uphold the state's constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, and...
Well, she unfortunately submitted her brief in the latest round of the case to the court on the same day that the circuit came down with the you can't exclude gay jurors just because they're gay decision.
But she cites in her brief bigamy and incest as banned marriages. Lambda will answer her over the next month.
Yeah, but the whole thing with her is that in her brief, she said gay people or sexual orientation is not entitled to heightened scrutiny because we're all perverts or it's bigamy or whatever. And she submitted this brief that was all based on this level of scrutiny on the same day that the court had said, oh, by the way, sexual orientation is entitled to heightened scrutiny. So now, to her credit, She has read that decision of theirs and has come back and said publicly, I have to rethink my whole brief because clearly the Ninth Circuit has just destroyed my entire argument.
And one of the clerks in, I think it's Nevada, has withdrawn his defense of the law.
Absolutely.
Yes.
One of the county clerks that was defending the ban and refusing to hand out marriage licenses now says, oh, never mind.
We call that getting religion.
No, we don't, but whatever.
Now, last week we told you
So,
about...
to be determined in Nevada.
Right. Last week we told you about Anise Parker, the out lesbian mayor of Houston, about her going off to Palm Springs and getting married. So she got some criticism back home from obviously from the right wing.
Right.
And here was her response. You don't commit 23 years of your life to someone to make a political statement. I took 4 days off to leave my home and make a little wedge of time to marry the woman I love. They can get over it, she said. I love it when she says that. She said the same thing about that business, about the Duck Dynasty people.
Oh, yes,
she
yes.
says,
They're redneck idiots, I think.
And you don't like that, get over it. All right.
Well, I guess everybody on both sides is like that.
Right. What about New York?
Well, interesting decision by a judge in New York this week. A lesbian couple, as the New York Times says, decided to start a family, and one of them gave birth, and then they're married. They got married when it became legal in New York State. They married in New York State, and they decided, though, that they wanted to guarantee the parental rights of both members of the couple, although they're both on the birth certificate of the child. Excuse me.
So it's not automatic?
Well, that's the thing. They went to court and they said, we want to have a legal second parent adoption.
Do you need that
by
when
the
you...
excuse me.
Go ahead. You got to sneeze. You go ahead. Well,
excuse me, by the non-birth mother. So they go to court and the judge says, look, I'm all supportive of this. I'm a great same-sex marriage supporter. But I want to treat same-sex married couples the same as opposite-sex married couples. And opposite-sex married couples don't come in here and ask for a second parent adoption.
Right.
And you're both on the birth certificate. You don't need a second parent adoption. You are legally the parents of this child. Well, the problem is that they may travel to other states. One of them's from Nicaragua, and they may travel there, and their marriage will not be recognized, and the parental rights of the non-birth mother may not be recognized. And so that's where it gets tricky.
what do our legal groups have to say about this?
I don't know that they've said anything yet.
Okay. Well, to be
But it's
continued.
an interesting case because the judge keeps saying, look, I want to treat you equally.
As my conservative brother said when this whole thing got started, it's going to be a mess.
I think every story we've done is about complications.
Yes.
I love that.
So,
I revel in the complications.
But Kansas is trying to resolve some of the complications. They've got a bill there to let groups and individuals who make excuses for not serving gay couples if they have religious objections, which is really piling on.
Well, this is a complication that is a mess.
All right,
and
so
comes up week after week.
Let's talk about the State of the Union, our president.
Okay. Well, you ask about major legal groups and their opinion of the court case. The major LGBT groups are putting out press releases about being upset that the president, in his State of the Union speech, did not talk specifically or promise to issue an executive order forbidding federal contractors, businesses doing business with the federal government, from discriminating against their employees on the basis of sexual orientation or gender expression.
He keeps saying, and in the fact sheet associated with this from the White House on the State of the Union address, about how important he felt the Employment Non-Discrimination Act was. But this speech was supposed to be about how I'm going to take executive action because the Congress won't act.
Well, it was.
And he didn't talk about us, and he should have.
Well, he talked about raising the minimum wage and doing that by executive order with federal contractors.
Yeah.
But, he can't say everything. I will defend the fact that, I want him to issue it too, and I think he should. And he keeps saying, I'm going to pursue the legislative. Didn't it pass the Senate? Aren't we waiting on the impossible House now?
Well, don't forget we don't like the bill the way it is because it has that very overbroad religious exemption.
There you
so
go.
I'm not rooting for it in the House.
So maybe an executive order would have fewer religious exemptions.
It might have some, but we'll see.
Okay.
We need to work for a clean bill.
Okay.
All right. Now, okay. Let's talk about California. The new Speaker of the Assembly is someone we know, not personally, but out lesbian Toni Atkins, 51, of San Diego. She served as the director once. We got a picture of her there. She served there she was in the middle there with the homeless people. Good for her. Served as the director of the Women's Care Clinic for more than 20 years in San Diego. She grew up in Appalachia, apparently speaks with a little southern lilt in her accent, and is the daughter of a coal miner and a seamstress in a place that had no running water or indoor bathrooms. But she's married to Jennifer Lasar, and she served as the interim mayor of San Diego once.
Yes, she did, and she replaces John Perez, who was the out gay Speaker of the Assembly before her, union leader.
And she says, look, it's obviously not my only issue, but she is a lesbian activist, and they do a tremendous amount out there in California to get a lot of bills passed.
Right.
We're lucky if we get one every 5 years here in New York.
Please.
10
and
years.
then we have a couple of sadder cases about violence against LGBT people.
Yes.
You want to start with Ohio?
Yes. In Ohio, we have a picture there. This is of 22-year-old Alliance, Ohio college student Justin Early. He was murdered in late December by a guy named John R. Fox, 34, who was a registered sex offender with a criminal record a mile long, who lured him on Craigslist. Then he kills him, hides the body in the closet for 3 weeks, which is why we're only talking about now. Now, we want to use this very tragic case to remind you all that when you meet via hookup, we urge you, there are all kinds of safety tips that you could do. We urge you to meet in a neutral place. Don't go directly to the person's home. Meet at a bar, meet at a coffee shop, so that other people see the other person. Some people say they even take a picture of the person and send it to your friend when you see them and make a joke about it or something like that. But something
if you're seeing a picture of them online, send that to your friend.
That's something that protects you. So they also said when you're going to go meet somebody, although it's a little late for this, leave a note behind to where you're going, so that, you could, of course, just be abducted or something like that. Whatever. There's all kinds of things you can do for safety, and should. Very sad about Justin.
Very sad, and people I think are afraid of looking paranoid or whatever, but these things really, really happen, and we tend to hear about these cases, a couple of times a month.
I have friends to whom it's happened. I have friends who've just been robbed, from their apartments with knockout drops and things like that.
So, look a little nerdy, look a little paranoid, and protect yourself.
As we used to say in the construction business, safety first. All right.
But we can't say that Randy Jenner was not trying to be safe. He was just coming home from the theater and an after-theater party.
He's a journalist and theater, writes about the theater.
Filipino, walking up 7th Avenue, a couple of blocks from home. And boom, some guy gets out of a car and just brutally beats the hell out of him.
Cocks him. It's a totally surprise attack. He didn't see anything.
Really brutalized him. He ends up in the hospital, brain surgery, took a couple of days to come out of it, still doesn't remember the attack. But there were bystanders who saw this guy get back in a car, got the license plate number, and there has now been an arrest.
We don't know that this was gay bashing. We don't know what the motive was.
Could have been anti-Asian,
But he was not robbed.
No.
And
he was just beaten.
It was, whatever it was. So there was a big vigil. 75 people turned out for a vigil on Sunday night.
All over the news here in New York.
A very big issue in the Filipino-American community as well, which is good to see folks come out. And so our thoughts are with you, Randy.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, another thing that happened in New York is a straight guy is suing for discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. He works at Trinity School in Manhattan, And he says that
prep school on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, you know, very fancy school. He said his lesbian boss discriminated against him based on his gender, sexual orientation, age, and traditional family status. He said he was excluded from social events with them. Now, we don't know if any of this is true. We don't know who's right and who's wrong, but it shows that you can use the law on, you know, if you are straight and this does happen to you.
Laws against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation apply to everybody. And to think that sexual orientation is just a code for gay is wrong. Anyone can be discriminated against on the basis of their particular sexual orientation and has the right to sue or register a complaint about it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Chris Kluwe, there's an update on that story. This is the former kicker for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yep.
He claims that Coach Priefer, P-R-I-E-F-E-R,
yes.
the one he said is anti-gay.
Yep.
He says that, and Priefer denied making anti-gay comments, but Kluwe's lawyer says texts support claims that the Vikings knew about this before Kluwe was released last May after the homophobic remarks.
And they're coming up with names of witnesses who were in the room, and it looks like they have some pretty strong evidence on this.
And speaking of sports, by the way, we didn't mention Jason Collins, the out basketball player of the NBA who hasn't been able to get another job yet, was in with Michelle Obama at the State of the Union.
Oh, well, and wasn't mentioned by the president in his speech.
He made some oblique remark about tolerance or something, and they took a picture of him in the balcony, so nobody knew what the hell it was about. But the president did say something about sexual orientation and marriage.
He did. Well, he talked about working with governors on marriage equality or something, and people were sort of saying, huh? What's that all about?
What is this disturbing suicide report from the Williams Institute?
The Williams Institute and the Transgender organization and the National Suicide Organization have gotten together and analyzed statistics from the National Transgender Study that has been done before. You know how these reports often reanalyze data. They go into bigger studies and tease stuff out. And this new report that you can find on the Williams Institute website says, the headline from it is that 41% of people who identify as transsexual or transgender also report having made suicide attempts. Now, this is more than suicide ideation, which we know to be very high, yes, in the LGBT community. These are actual attempts. Now, there are also many factors that contribute to this, and mostly it's about how people are treated and the experiences they have in their families or friends or at work, which can propel them in that direction, and depression, of course. But it's a much higher rate than in the population in general. And so if you're interested in examining this report, go to the Williams Institute website and you'll find it there.
Obviously, it can be a very isolating experience. Obviously, being gay or lesbian is very isolating for a lot of people. A lot less so now because more and more of us have come out. But one of the things we learned, even in doing the show and having transgender guests on, is that many do not want to come out. They want to be just seen as the new gender that they are, and not have to identify as transgender.
That's true of a lot of gay people too.
Yes, but I think more so with transgender folks. This is from a transgender person telling us this on the show.
The goal
when we brought
for
up
many,
the issue of coming out,
particularly transsexual people, is to assume the new gender identity and not be seen as having transitioned, and that is that. That's the life goal. Right.
Now, somebody who has come out is one of the leading candidates for student body president at the University of North Carolina. Frank Bruni wrote a good column about him in the New York Times, the out columnist at the Times. His name is Emilio Vicente, 22, a Latino, undocumented, and gay. And yet, one of the leading candidates for student body president, embodying this. He's one of these kids who came over with parents when he was little and would be affected by the DREAM Act.
They were deported.
Yes. Well, no, they went back because if somebody was sick back there to take care of somebody.
Yes. But he's still here and has taken a very prominent out role.
Hawaii is joining the bandwagon of considering a ban on gay conversion therapy for minors. These are minors. Kids, young people. 100 people have already signed up to testify. When you have a public hearing in Hawaii, they come out. I mean, that marriage thing, what was it, like 5,000 people testified?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Well, who are the 100 who've signed up? Which side?
I don't know.
Because it's the evangelical groups that turned out thousands against marriage.
Know.
They could be coming to testify that they're all ready to convert us.
And then we have a story from Oregon about the first out college football player. We've got a picture of him there. He's Connor Mertens of Willamette. Is that how you say it?
Willamette.
Willamette University.
Although some may say Willamette.
Well, it's Division III, and he's a redshirt freshman kicker, but it's a start.
Well, the deal is...
He came out as bisexual, by the way, to his teammates, and here's what he said. I'm bisexual, he told his coach. I'm bisexual, I like dudes, and I have a boyfriend. And next week, I'm telling the whole world. And the coach said, fine.
Well,
great.
before he said that to the coach, he said, am I a good kicker? Because he wanted to know whether he was going to lose his chance at being on the team. Because as a redshirt freshman, he is not officially on the team yet. I mean, he hasn't played officially. You know, he was taking a chance, but everybody's been extremely supportive.
Okay. The TSA will allow same-sex couples to go through pre-flight screening as a couple now, all over the world. There had been complaints about American Airlines personnel in Medellin, Colombia. Yeah. And
explain to me why people want to go through as a couple.
Well, it's because otherwise...
More fun?
Because, look, when you've been on these lines,
yeah.
One of you is over here, one of you gets sent to that line, you get on a different line, you want to leave together.
Well, you can get on the same line together.
Maybe.
Well, I guess you don't want one left behind while you've already gone through. Yeah.
All right. Well, and
I get it.
And then there's immigration issues. A couple from India here applying for asylum.
Gay couple.
Based on the oppression of gays back home in India, who had been in detention in El Paso.
Immigration detention is one of the worst situations.
It's purgatory.
It is, and you have no access to the rights that American citizens usually have, and these places are privatized, and you're treated horribly.
The case was helped by the fact that India's High Court reinstated the sodomy laws. We'll more about that later. Their families had threatened to kill them back home, but that wasn't enough. But they were granted asylum on December 20th.
When the sodomy ban was reinstated by the Indian Supreme Court.
But I want to read given that their detention, that they were in detention here, one of them said, "We wish to stay in the sky, not here, not on earth." In other words, they've been through hell.
They have.
And even though they've been granted asylum, this has been a hellation. I guess they're not so sure about our place as well.
Even after they got out of detention, they're not having such a great time here, and they're not finding this heaven on earth.
And if we have more time later, I'll talk about that religious freedom case in Louisiana.
Okay. Although we're...
Yeah. How we doing?
Maybe not. Well,
right,
we're doing
maybe
okay.
Not.
We're doing
Russia.
okay. Well, let's finish up the India case first, as long as we're moving to international news. So you may remember that a few weeks ago, the Indian Supreme Court, to everyone's shock, in a case that had been going on for some years, suddenly comes out with this decision that says, you know what, we are reinstituting the ban on sodomy because, after all, it's only about a sex act. It's not about people. It's just the sex act, and that's perverted and horrible. So we're recriminalizing sodomy.
Because in 2009, a lower court, appeals court, had gotten rid of them, and it seemed like for the whole country, practically.
Right. So then everybody's in complete shock that the Indian Supreme Court has reinstituted this ban, and even the government decides this is not a good idea.
Well, the government said it's not a good idea, and they did appeal to the court, but the court rejected all of these petitions.
That's the new decision.
That's the new decision, but if the government wants to get rid of the law, and they don't have much time because there's an election coming up, and they're going to lose. and the more conservative government is coming in. So do they have the guts at election time to repeal this law?
To go to Parliament and say...
I would say unlikely. I would be happy to be shocked about that.
Absolutely. But they could find ways to not bring it up.
The law is rarely enforced. It does carry a 10-year prison term, but it is used by the police to harass gay people.
And
we're criminals.
What happens with these laws is they say, oh, it's rarely enforced. It's rarely enforced. It's rarely enforced.
George Bush said that to me about the Texas law, to me, when he was running for president.
I'm sure you've told us that story,
yes.
But whatever. But what it does is intimidate people. It gets in the way of HIV prevention. It gets in the way of people being publicly open. It gets in the way of, gay clubs being visible. It just drives everything underground, and it gives families license to reject people. I don't care if it's rarely enforced. It sets up a system in the country that is horrible.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we can talk about Russia.
Okay.
The sad but funny news this week was from the mayor of Sochi, who, when asked about gay people, says, we don't have them in our town. He says, because we don't live there, we're welcome if we respect Russian laws and we don't impose our habits on others. There are two gay clubs in Sochi.
Well, he said this to a BBC interviewer who said, really, I've just come from a gay club. Who were those people in the club?
Maybe they're just happy.
Yeah. But the big brouhaha this week has been around the corporate sponsors of the Olympics. We've been after them for some months now, and we've been asking the corporate sponsors, all of whom are companies that do billions of dollars of business in Russia on an ongoing basis. Yep. This isn't just about the Olympics for them. And we have said to them, look, you knew these laws were coming. You did nothing to stop them. You have got to go to Putin and say, this is horrible. You must repeal these laws. You must make life safe for LGBT people in Russia.
And they wouldn't do it. So
they wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't.
We're messing with them.
Well, exactly. We also want them to they keep saying, we are the gay-friendliest company in the world. We have 100% rating from HRC. And we say, yes, but do you have these same rules in Russia for your employees and customers there? Do you publish those rules in Russian in Russia? Do you speak up? Do you have advertising in Russia that is diverse and friendly? And the answer, of course, is no to all of this.
Yeah.
So Queer Nation and others have been demanding all this from sponsors. They have said no, so we started messing with them. And we got particularly mad at Coke because you may remember the story last week of the poor little protester who showed up on one of these Olympic torch relays with this tiny little rainbow flag and stepped out and held the flag and got flattened by Russian and Olympic security. And the Olympic security guy who grabbed this guy had Coke logos all over him. So we went to Coke and said, is this really how you want your logo used? And they said, yes. He violated the perimeter. He was a threat. He should have been arrested.
Things don't go better with Coke. But so what guys like Scott Woolidge and Queer Nation are doing are going, they all have these, online presences and things like that, social media presences. Campaigns that they think are light and funny, and we love Sochi and blah, 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 blah.
Cheers to Sochi.
Right, there you are. And they go in and they screw with these and take their hashtags and all that kind of stuff and get to deliver the fact that it's a very anti-gay situation here.
The company set up these Twitter campaigns, and they want everybody to comment and send messages to the athletes. So we start sending messages to the athletes saying, boycott McDonald's and Coke and get rid of homophobia in Russia.
Right.
And the companies are just freaking out.
I wonder if the Human Rights Campaign, which many of you are probably a member of, are going to mark these companies down for their anti-gay
It's an
stuff.
interesting question because they have put out press releases demanding that the corporations act right.
Raising money off it.
Absolutely, and with their T-shirts.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, and look at Stoli. Stoli is trying to buy goodwill in the community, a Russian company, although they act like they're from Lithuania, I think.
Latvia.
They gave $300,000 to the LA Lesbian and Gay Center. And
they took it.
I don't think we want them to be the official sponsor of Gay USA.
I think that
We're not taking their money.
LA LGBT Community Center should have taken that $300,000 and given it to the LGBT community in Russia.
Yes, absolutely.
If they took anything at all. But they should certainly have not been anything more than a pass-through. But instead, they've taken the money.
So what about this new bill in the Duma, which is the Russian parliament? It would ban propagandizing sexual relations of any kind to children. But it would still have provisions against the public promotion of homosexuality. It's only going to be used against us.
Well, here's the deal. You may remember...
Like sodomy laws.
You remember in the AIDS epidemic when Jesse Helms proposed a law in Congress that said you cannot promote homosexuality.
Or heterosexuality.
Well, the original proposal was just that it be homosexuality, and Ted Kennedy came in and said, we'll add heterosexuality so that the law will be meaningless.
This is in the midst of the AIDS crisis when we need to talk about sex.
So I was reminded of that when this came up. What happens is that a few members of the Russian parliament knowing what's going on all over the world and how humiliated they're being, have said, let's amend the law. Instead of making it illegal to promote non-traditional sex to minors, we'll make it illegal to promote any sex to minors.
It was like the sodomy law, though, in the military. It forbade certain sex acts, most of which are committed by heterosexuals, but no heterosexual was ever thrown out of the military for that, only us.
And the assessment of this proposal by these Duma members is, A, it will never pass, and B, it will be applied unequally, and this is meaningless. But what I like about it is that it is concrete evidence that what we're doing is having an effect. It is making people begin to regret what they've done and take a look at ways to get out from under the worldwide condemnation.
Well, I regret what Bob Schieffer did this weekend. He's the host of Face the Nation, and I don't want to make any ageist remark, being 60 myself, but it's time to put him out to pasture. I mean, his idea of having a trenchant discussion about these issues that you just explained very well on this program is to have Brian Boitano on, who doesn't want to talk about politics.
No.
He was pathetic, and then he has Billie Jean King on, who I have a lot more respect for. But she's part of the Sochi delegation from the United States. But then she goes ahead and says, I have complete respect for the Russian people. I've been going there since 1962. Well, Billie Jean, have you read the polls? 85% of the Russian people you love so much support these laws. And then she says, I hope that these Olympics will be a watershed moment for the universal acceptance of all people. Well, that's just a bunch of pap. I mean, come on.
Well, I'll say a couple of things on the other side.
Because I like Billie Jean King.
Yeah, me too. A significant portion of the United States population still doesn't like us, too.
I know. That's why we still do this show.
Read some blog comments. And, she is proposing a somewhat Pollyanna-ish view, but I am hoping, and I think we all are, that revolution will break out at the Olympics. People will be waving rainbow flags or speaking out in interviews or doing whatever. And I think that's what she's talking about. And I'm sure that she will speak honestly and openly when asked at the Olympics, as she has been. So,
what about Brian? I hope he doesn't.
Brian has nothing to say.
He needs a briefing from Queer Nation.
Well, here's what Queer Nation is doing.
Yes.
There's talk by several organizations about what to do around the beginning of the Olympics. But here's the big thing in New York. On Thursday, February 6th, competition starts at the Olympics. The opening ceremonies, as is traditional with the Olympics, are not till the following night, February 7th. But competition starts the 6th. So Queer Nation on the 6th, on Thursday at noon, will be at the Russian consulate on East 91st Street between 5th and Madison Avenues, noon on Thursday.
Right across from the Cooper Hewitt.
Exactly. And we will be demonstrating there and letting the Russians know directly again.
That gay bashing is not an Olympic sport.
Yes.
That's the theme.
So we would love to have all of you join us. It's going to be inspiring and important. And
we'll be there. You can meet us.
We will certainly be there, sending a message
if you'd like
to the Russian government that who are the real enemy, that they should not allow their citizens to be treated this way anymore.
All right. And we've been telling you that it's been getting worse and worse in Nigeria. Now, in the north, in a city called, I want to say Bauchi, B-A-U-C-H-I, this is where Sharia law rules. 11 men were arrested for belonging to a gay organization. For belonging to a gay organization.
Well, that's the definition under the law.
So they're having a trial for these in this court. Thousands of people from the town stormed the court, urging speedy convictions and executions of the men. Security fired shots to get the men safely back to prison. Now, and with all due respect, the judge says no one can be sentenced to death until confirmed without a reasonable doubt. And he was starting to doubt some of the testimony because people were coming in and were supposedly witnessing. You're supposed to actually catch them in the act.
Yeah.
And he was saying,
of attending a meeting.
No. Well, I mean, the thing is, it was sex. So anyway.
So these protesters, this mob, was throwing rocks at these guys.
Coming through the windows of the courtroom, everybody's fleeing for their lives. Now, but then I subsequently read a story that a guy named John, this was in The Guardian, UK paper, he's one of the leading gay activists there, but he's been living outside the country. He snuck into the country for this trial, snuck in at night, went to the trial, was in the courtroom when the rocks were flying, and somehow got out of there. He thought it was going to be a surprise. He was going to make a statement and all this other kind of stuff. But the people were shouting outside, "Bring them out so we can kill them." This is like the Salem witch trials.
Or worse.
Yes.
Well, they killed them, too.
Well, anyway.
John, we would be very honored to have you as a guest on Gay USA, and you don't have to sneak in here.
Well, on March the 7th, mark your calendars, we don't have an exact date on this, there was a Nigerian activist at the Queer Nation meeting last night. They don't want us to go to the embassy, well, maybe we should, of Nigeria. They want us to have big international demonstrations. And in the United States, it's going to be at the United Nations and at the White House.
Okay.
So people can, if people want to do something about this,
I'm in favor of that.
We'll keep you posted about that.
Okay.
All right. A couple of stories out of Israel. 25 gay couples that used surrogacy in Thailand to have children were being denied passports back for the kids once the kids were born. So they protested at the home of the government minister responsible, attacking him as a father of a newborn. They got an agreement allowing the babies born, but they have to have been born by November of this year in order to get passports. Israeli gays used to go to India for surrogacy until India banned them.
I'm speechless.
And then but we told you a little bit about this last week, but they did a big story on the leading author of Kenya, one of the leading authors. His name is Binyavanga Wainaina, 43. We have a picture of him. He's
a favorite of Oprah's.
Yeah, he has updated his memoir to bravely come out. The local paper called it a gay bombshell. He calls homophobia a Victorian export from Britain, and I wish that Africans believed that, because maybe they'd stop oppressing us.
Yeah.
He is optimistic that there can be change on the continent, but he warns that it's going to be turbulent.
I think we've seen that already.
He said he came out because of the death of friends who were thrown out of their homes or AIDS weighed on him, and he's gotten a lot of support from friends and even a Catholic priest. Okay.
Good for him.
And
back to Israel, we are mourning the death there of a wonderful woman, Shulamit Aloni, who is considered the mother, in some ways, of the Israeli gay movement.
Not a lesbian that we know of.
No, but
she was so supportive. She led the fight to repeal the anti-sodomy law there in 1988. And she's been a civil rights leader on many fronts, and yeah. So
died at 81, I think.
I don't know the exact age,
Okay.
but we're not going to tell. In northern Cyprus, they repealed their ban on gay sex. The vote was 28-1, but there were 21 abstentions.
This is a Turkish area of Cyprus, and this is the last area of Europe that had an official anti-sodomy law. So Europe, well, certainly things are not perfect, but
Especially in Eastern Europe.
But Europe is now officially free of all sodomy bans.
Back to the bad stories in Africa, especially the Ivory Coast, where the headquarters of the local LGBT group, Alternative Côte d'Ivoire, was attacked by a mob of 200 people in Abidjan Saturday. Following days of threats, which they reported to the police and the police did nothing about. This guy, Clavar Touré, said that the response from the security forces to the threats was deliberately slow. In the attack, the office was ransacked, a security guard was injured severely, and equipment was stolen. Man, and this country does not have a sodomy law.
Exactly. No anti-sodomy law, and yet the office is ransacked.
And back to Uganda, President Museveni said he won't sign the anti-gay bill until he gets a report, he wants this in February, from scientists confirming that homosexuality is not genetic, but is an acquired thing.
I'm beginning to appreciate the cleverness of this president of Uganda. First of all, he stopped this bill from going anywhere for years, and then when they finally did it without a quorum in Parliament, he's found other ways to delay it.
All right, I'll go back to these later if we have time. AIDS news.
The good news, it's all about the rent cap in New York for people living with HIV and AIDS.
If they're on government assistance.
If they're on government assistance. Now, other people on government assistance.
You can end up paying 70 or 80% of your assistance on rent.
Exactly.
So they're saying if you're in this situation and you need have other needs in life, they want to put a 30% cap on the rent that you pay.
Which exists for other people on public assistance, similarly situated. This is a traditional law, but somehow people with AIDS have not been beneficiaries of this system, and so we've been going to the state for years to say, what if we showed you a couple of years ago the most emotional speech we've ever seen on the floor of the New York State Senate by Tom Duane.
And the Senate voted for it, which is Republican at the time, and I believe, maybe not.
Okay. And David Patterson, the liberal governor of New York, vetoed it.
Because Bloomberg didn't want it.
Yes.
But now...
So now we've been asking the new mayor, de Blasio, for a different opinion so that we might again go back to the legislature. And de Blasio has now said publicly that he does support the 30% rent cap.
That's great. Anything else on AIDS?
I don't have my notes,
okay.
So I don't know. But I think we're doing great without them.
I think we're doing great.
I don't think I should ever bring my notes.
It's all in your head. It's all in your head. Entertainment news?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that the headline is the Grammys.
Sure.
And a lot of controversy around it. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis won a number of awards, and everybody said, oh, no, the white guys won the hip-hop awards. This is bad news.
Didn't Eminem used to win the rapping award?
But he was embedded in the African-American hip-hop community. He was discovered and sponsored by Dr. Dre. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis have come out of Seattle all on their own.
So what category should they be in?
Well, I'm not saying they shouldn't be in this category. I'm just saying that there were a lot of people they beat out who were saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? But anyway, so their big song, the song they won the Grammys for was the Thrift Shop song, but the other song that's been a big hit for them is the Same Love song that you've seen played on this show. And
Same Love.
Yeah. And it's about marriage equality, and they were a big part of the marriage equality movement in Washington State that helped get it passed.
And it's about growing up gay and being isolated and all that kind of stuff. So what did they do with that number? They said, let's have a wedding. They had a mass wedding. Not since the Reverend Sun Myung Moon have I seen such a mass wedding. That's not true. We had a big gay one after one of the marches on Washington back in
79,
87.
I thought.
No, 87.
Oh, okay.
87.
33 couples stood in the aisles of the Grammys. That was another point of contention. Why weren't they on the stage? Oh, if they're on the stage, it's too much of a stunt. Put them in the aisles. Oh, no one sees them in the aisles. And is CBS cutting away from them kissing?
Yes.
Maybe.
But
they denied it. CBS denied it.
But the big news is now, a lot about gay stars in show business, and they chose to have Queen Latifah, a big closet case, preside over this. Now, I posted this on Facebook saying I think that's a shame because she refuses to acknowledge her partner and who she is. And boy, did I get beaten up on Facebook by half the people writing in. I think it's an outrage.
Look, when I told people this was going to happen and she was going to preside over this, they said, oh, she's out, isn't she? And I said, no, she isn't. Google her.
That's like people who used to say, oh, you've got same-sex marriage in Hawaii, don't you? This is years ago, 15 years ago.
People, you know,
they
watch this show. You'll get the news. But if you Google Queen Latifah gay, you get, I am not a lesbian, says Queen Latifah. So we found that extremely disappointing. But to me, the most amusing thing was, I'll finish this up and then go to that. So then she performs the ceremony and out comes Madonna, hobbling with a cane in a white cowboy outfit. And I say to myself, Gabby Hayes!
We have to show you a picture for you youngsters who don't know who Gabby Hayes was.
Now,
he was a star of the 1930s. Very funny guy.
That was my immediate association. Others made more current references.
Glad you said it instead of me. I get in a lot of trouble.
Well, she's injured her leg, so she actually was hobbling from an injury using the cane, but it just was weird. But to me, the real gay moment in the Grammys was this young country star, Casey Musgraves, who sang a song called Follow Your Arrow, which it turned out she was not allowed to sing on The View because it was so pro-gay and drugs and stuff.
That Barbara Walters.
Well, it's all about if you want to do this, fine. If you want to do that, fine. And the chorus is kiss a lot of boys or kiss a lot of girls if that's what you're into, aimed at young women.
All right,
I thought it was quite charming.
Only got a minute and a half. I just want to run through a couple of things. Robert De Niro has done an HBO documentary, a half hour about his dad, out gay. Robert Sr., who was an artist and
played at Sundance.
Yeah, he was an abstract expressionist who drifted into more of impressionism later in his life. In Madrid, they had the opening of the opera Brokeback Mountain. By a composer they call a complex modernist, but Annie Proulx, is that how you say her name? She did the libretto. What is this story? Oh, I want to pay tribute to Pete Seeger, a great progressive activist, and Bill Ballman, our associate producer, reminded me when they had a march to Albany, from New York City to Albany, when they actually marched up there.
March.
Yeah, gay march, gay rights march. They stopped over, and Pete Seeger put them up at his house.
Very nice.
That was nice.
1972.
He was just a great in many fronts. Couple of theater things. I got a couple of pictures of these. I saw the play A Man's Man by Bertolt Brecht at Classic Stage, one of my favorite places. This included, we got a picture of this. It's sort of an avowedly confusing anti-war play. That's what they say at the beginning. But despite the presence of Stephen Spinella, Martin Moran, and Justin Vivian Bond, I'm sorry, it was boring.
You got 20 seconds.
John Patrick Shanley, Outside Mullingar, a little too, precious for me, despite good performances from Brian O'Byrne and Deborah Messing. And I really like Dr. Du Bois and Miss Ovington, about two of the founders of the NAACP. We had a picture of that. It was terrific. Catch it at the Castillo Theater.
And we will see you next week, and we hope to see you next Thursday at noon at the Russian consulate here in New York, 91st Street between 5th and Madison, noon on Thursday.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Oh, well.
For saving my
I write big.
bacon.